I wake up with aching joints, not sunlight streaming through the curtains. 75 years is no joke, especially when you get up alone in an empty house. The bed to my right has been empty for 5 years. I still haven't gotten out of the habit of waking up and turning to where Eleanor slept. Sometimes I even reach out, expecting to feel the warmth of her body, but all I meet is a cool sheet. My house in South Sioux City is too big for a lonely old man. 2 floors, 4 bedrooms, a living room with a fireplace, a kitchen where Eleanor used to make her signature blueberry muffins on Sundays. Now I hardly ever go into the kitchen anymore. I order takeout or heat up convenience foods. The living room with bookshelves littered with volumes on economics and finance, a legacy of 40 years as a financial analyst, collects dust. Eleanor always said I should spend more time with Reese, our only son. "He needs your attention, Erwin," she repeated. I was too busy building a career, securing the family's future. Ironically, now that I have the time, Reese only comes around when he needs something. Struggling to get out of bed, I pull on a robe and slowly make my way down the stairs, holding onto the banister. It's worth considering installing the damn elevator, but I hate the very thought of admitting that the stairs have become an insurmountable obstacle. Brewing coffee. The only thing I still make myself, I notice the red light on the answering machine. 4 messages, 3 from Reese and 1 from his wife Audrey. She's 15 years younger than my son and works as a lawyer at a firm specializing in property disputes. I've never said it out loud, but I believe my son was more of a bargaining chip for her than the love of her life. Reese inherited my penchant for finance but not my discipline. He works as a broker, but his lifestyle has always exceeded his income. "Dad, this is Reese. Audrey and I will stop by around 3 today. There's an important matter. It's no big deal. We just want to talk about something." I grin, sipping my coffee. Important matter has become a euphemism for talking about my money lately. Since Eleanor died, Reese has noticeably increased his visits. We used to see each other at Christmas and Thanksgiving. Now he drops by twice a month. Not that I mind. The old man enjoys company, even if his motives are questionable. The morning drags on slowly. I look through the newspaper, which I still subscribe to out of old habit, though I could read the news on the internet. After breakfast, I go out to the garden, the small patch behind the house where the roses that Eleanor loves so much grow. I keep the garden in order, even though I don't know as much about flowers as she did. It's my way of keeping her presence alive. "You'd laugh at your old man, Ellie," I say as I trim the dry branches. "Remember how we used to dream about spending our old age here together? That we'd sit on the porch, holding hands, watching the sunset?" Only the wind answers me, rustling the leaves of the maple trees we planted when we moved into this house 30 years ago. At 3 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rings. Reese and Audrey are always punctual when it comes to money. I open the door and greet them with a smile that doesn't reach my eyes. "Dad!" Reese hugs me with ostentatious warmth. He's tall like me when I was young, but starting to go bald. Dressed expensively but casually, cashmere sweater, designer jeans. Audrey follows him, slim, trim, with flawless makeup and raven wing-colored hair gathered in a tight bun. She kisses me on the cheek, leaving a faint scent of expensive perfume. "How are you, Erwin?" she asks with a smile that never touches her gray eyes. "You look chipper." "For your age," I add, and Audrey laughs awkwardly. "Come on in, I've made tea." They follow me into the living room, where I've already prepared a teapot and cups on an antique table. Eleanor bought it at an auction 20 years ago, giving away a fortune. "It's an investment in beauty," she'd said then. "How are things going at work, son?" I ask as I pour the tea. "Fine, Dad. The stock market is booming. I've got some promising clients." Reese speaks confidently, but I notice he avoids looking me in the eye. "How's your firm, Audrey? A lot of property disputes lately?" "Quite a few," she answers with restraint. "But we're not here to talk about work." "Yes, Dad," Reese says, setting her cup aside. "Audrey and I are very worried about you." I raise an eyebrow, waiting for her to continue. "You live alone in this big house. We've noticed that you've become a little distracted." "Distracted?" I ask again. "What do you mean?" "Well, for example, last time you forgot that we were supposed to meet," Audrey interjects. "And your garden. The roses don't look as tidy as they used to. I remember very well that they came unannounced last time, and the roses look exactly the way they should in early fall. But I choose not to argue. What's your point? I ask bluntly. Reese and Audrey exchange glances. We think you need to think about the future, Reese says, about how to safeguard your assets. My assets? I act surprised. What's wrong with them? Irwin, Audrey leans forward, her voice trusting. In our practice, I often see elderly people fall victim to fraud or inheritance problems that arise because of a lack of proper paperwork. I have a will, I answer, and I'm not so old that I'm not in control of my finances. Sure, Dad, Reese tries to look reassuring, but we're talking about preventative measures, like having a trustee manage your accounts. And who would manage them? I ask, even though I already know the answer. I could, Reese says, or Audrey and I together. It's standard practice. Many people your age pass financial management on to their children. I look out the window at the maple tree Eleanor and I planted. Its leaves are starting to turn yellow. I wonder what she would say now. Eleanor always believed the best in people, especially our son. And the house too? I ask. Do you want me to rewrite the house? Not right now, Audrey says quickly, but it might be worth considering co-ownership. It would protect you from possible tax consequences when you inherit. I nod, pretending to consider their suggestion. Actually, I'm thinking about how cleverly they're sidestepping the main issue. Why would they want access to my money now, while I'm still alive? You know, son, I say after a pause, I appreciate your concern, but I'd like to discuss this with my financial advisor. I don't want to make any hasty decisions. Reese's face stiffens for a moment, but he quickly recovers his smile. Of course, Dad, it's the sensible thing to do. We just wanted to bring it up. We'll leave you the paperwork, Audrey adds, pulling a folder out of her designer bag. Here are sample powers of attorney and trust information. Just look through them when you have time. I accept the folder, feeling its heaviness not only physically but symbolically. It represents the first step toward taking away my control over my own life. Thank you, I say. I'll study them carefully. Dad, Reese suddenly becomes serious. We're really worried about you, not just about the money. You spend too much time alone. For a moment, I want to believe in his sincerity. Maybe somewhere deep down inside, my son really does care about me and not just my inheritance. But then I remember how he forgot my birthday last year, how he rarely called just to ask how I was before Eleanor left. I'm fine, Reese. I have my books, my garden. Sometimes I see Noel. We play chess. Noel, Audrey frowns. Your old co-worker? He's, not a very reliable person, is he? I suppress a smile. Noel is the only one of my friends who has openly expressed distrust of Reese and Audrey. No wonder they don't approve of him. He's been my friend for 40 years, I reply calmly, and I trust his judgment. The conversation turns to other topics. The weather, politics, a new restaurant that's open downtown. But I can feel the tension hanging in the air. The file folder rests on the table between us like a time bomb. When they finally leave, promising to stop by in a week, I close the door behind them, and for the first time in the entire visit, I truly exhale. Back in the living room, I pick up the folder and scrutinize the documents. Just as I expected, a power of attorney with broad powers, allowing Reese and Audrey to handle all of my assets, including real estate and bank accounts. What do you think, Ellie? I ask my wife's picture on the mantelpiece. Has our son grown up the way we wanted him to? Eleanor smiles at me from the photograph, just as she was 20 years ago. Blonde hair, warm brown eyes, a smile that could always melt my heart. I know you'd say to give him a chance, I continue, that deep down, he's a good boy. But I'm not sure, Ellie. I'm not sure at all. I put the papers aside and walk over to the window. The sun is setting over the horizon, coloring the South Sioux City sky in shades of orange and purple. Our maple tree casts a long shadow across the lawn. At this moment, I make a decision, not to sign anything. Furthermore, I will call my bank counselor and attorney tomorrow. Perhaps I should make some changes to my financial affairs, but not at all the kind of changes Reese and Audrey are counting on. The next day, I meet Noel at our favorite cafe, the Blue Cup, on the corner of Oak Street and Pine Avenue. It's been there for 30 years, and the owner, Hugh Keats, knows Noel and me as regulars. The cafe is small with only 6 tables, the walls painted a nice blue color, and pots of geraniums on the windowsills. Noel and I always take the corner table by the window. Noel Pritchett is my oldest friend. We met when we were both starting our careers in finance. Unlike me, he left the business early, at 60, and has spent the last 15 years traveling and playing chess. He's shorter than me, with a long gray beard and sharp eyes that seem to see right through people. So, Noel says, stirring the sugar in his espresso, your precious babies came to visit again? I nod, sipping my black coffee. Noel has never had kids, and he's always regarded Reese with mild skepticism. Yesterday, with a folder of trust documents for my assets, I pull the folded papers out of my pocket and hold them out to Noel. They want me to sign the power of attorney. For my own safety, of course. Noel looks over the papers, his face growing more and more grim. It's a damn generous power of attorney, he says, handing the papers back to me. They'll be able to control everything. Accounts, investments, real estate. Practically total control. And mind you, no restrictions or accountability to you. Exactly. I tuck the papers back into my pocket. They even hinted that I'm getting distracted. You? Noel snorts. The man who still remembers phone numbers from 50 years ago? You beat me at chess 3 games out of 5. And that's despite the fact that I play in senior citizen tournaments. I smile weakly. Nevertheless, they're trying to give the impression that I'm losing my grip. Audrey even mentioned my garden. Supposedly, it looks neglected. And what did you say to them? Noel asks. I told them I'd think about it, that I'd like to consult a financial advisor. Noel nods, humming approvingly. Smart, not saying no outright, but not saying yes either. He leans closer. What are you going to do? I stare out the window thoughtfully. People are walking down the street, going about their business. A young mother is pushing a stroller. 2 teenagers laughing on their cell phones. You know, I think there's something wrong here. Reese has never taken much interest in my business. Now all of a sudden, he's so concerned. I'm turning to Noel. I want to do a little research. What kind of investigation? Noel steps forward, curiosity in his eyes. I think Reese is in some kind of financial trouble, and he needs my money. It wouldn't be the first time, Noel observes. He's right. I remember Reese has come to me for help in the past. When he was 25, he borrowed a decent amount of money from me for a down payment on an apartment and never paid it back. Consider it an early inheritance, Dad, he said then with a carefree smile. Then there was the story of a failed investment in a friend's startup. Another loan that dissolved without a trace. And of course, my wedding to Audrey 10 years ago, a lavish event for 200 guests at a country club that I paid for in full. But this time it's more serious, I say. They want full control of my finances, not just a one-time loan. What exactly are you going to find out? Noel asks. For starters, whether Reese is really as good at his job as he claims. I take another sip of coffee. You still have connections in financial circles, don't you? Noel grins. Of course. What exactly are you interested in? Find out how things are going at his brokerage firm, and if possible, if he has any personal debts. Will do, Noel nods. But Erwin, let me ask you this. Are you prepared for what you might find out? I wonder. Am I ready to find out that my only son probably only sees me as a source of money? You know, I say after a pause, I've suspected it for a long time. I just didn't want to admit it. For Eleanor's sake. She's always believed in him. Noel puts a hand on my shoulder. Eleanor was a bright person. She saw the best in people. But sometimes people don't live up to our faith in them. We finish our coffee, discussing news and politics. We agree to meet in a couple days. Noel promises to have gathered information by then. Back home, I pull out an old box from the pantry, the one where I keep important documents and memorabilia. Among them is Eleanor's diary, which she kept for the last years of her life. I never read it after her death. I felt it would have been a violation of her privacy. But now I want to know what she thought about our son. Did she see things I didn't see? I open the diary, a small book in a blue cover with gold embossing. Eleanor's handwriting is neat, with a slight slant to the right. I flip through the pages until I find an entry dated 6 months before she died. Reese came by today, asked for money again, this time for some kind of investment. Erwin gave him a check without asking any questions. I didn't say anything. But it bothers me that our son, in his 40s, is still turning to us for financial help. What will happen when we are gone? I pray he learns to stand on his own 2 feet. I flip a few more pages. Audrey called today, asked about our will, said she's offering to help us with the legal issues of probate for free. That's thoughtful of her, but for some reason I'm uneasy. Maybe I'm just becoming a suspicious old lady. But I noticed her eyes light up when Erwin mentioned that his retirement portfolio is up 15% this quarter. I closed the journal, feeling heavy on my heart. So even Eleanor, with her faith in people, sensed something amiss. The next morning I call my bank counselor, Lyle Fenn, and schedule a meeting for 2 in the afternoon. Lyle has been working with me for 20 years. He is 25 years younger than me, but I trust his professionalism. Fenn's office is in the South Sioux City Business Center, a glass building overlooking the river. The receptionist ushers me into Lyle's office, a spacious room with panoramic windows and minimalist design. Erwin, Lyle gets up from behind his desk to shake my hand. It's good to see you. How's your health? At my age, every day without a new pain is a victory, I reply with a chuckle. We exchange the usual pleasantries, and then Lyle asks about the purpose of my visit. I have some concerns, I begin. My son and his wife have recently offered to sign a power of attorney, giving them control over my assets. I pull out the documents and hand them to Lyle. He examines them carefully, his face becoming serious. It's a very broad power of attorney, Erwin, he says. It gives them the right to handle all of your assets without restriction. That's what I thought. I nod. What's your advice? Lyle sets the documents aside and looks at me. Honestly, I wouldn't recommend signing this, at least not in this form. If you want to secure your assets in case of incapacity, there are much safer options. For example, a trust with an independent trustee or a power of attorney with limited powers. I nod, absorbing the information. There's something else, I add. I think my son may be in financial trouble. Is there anything you can find out about that? Lyle rubs his chin thoughtfully. I can't directly check your son's credit history without his consent, but, he pauses, there was one incident you should know about. What incident? I ask, tensing up. A month ago, the bank received a request for a loan against your house. The request was denied because the applicant was not the owner of the property. Lyle looks me straight in the eye. The applicant was Reese Travers. I feel a chill run down my spine. Are you sure? Positive. I noticed that because I know your family. I didn't want to bother you at the time, thought there might be some misunderstanding. But now, in light of what you've told me, my son tried to foreclose on my house, I say quietly, without my knowledge. I'm afraid so, Lyle nods. And judging by the size of the loan, he needed a substantial sum. How much? $750,000. I lean back in my chair, trying to make sense of this information. $750,000? What did Reese need that kind of money for? Erwin, Lyle's voice brings me back to reality. I recommend that you take a few precautions. First, make sure the bank has a restriction on transactions on your accounts without your personal presence. Second, it may be worth setting up additional layers of protection for online banking. Do you think he might try to access my accounts? I don't want to jump to conclusions, Lyle replies cautiously. But in my practice, there have been cases, unpleasant cases where relatives have tried to embezzle the assets of the elderly. It's better to be safe. I nod, feeling the bitterness of realizing how right Lyle was. My own son. There's something else, Lyle continues. If your son is really in serious financial trouble, he might resort to unorthodox methods. He might try to forge your signature on documents or convince you to sign something without fully explaining the consequences. What do you suggest? The first thing is to contact your attorney immediately. Update your will and all other legal documents. 2. Put your bank branch manager on notice that no major transactions should be conducted without your personal presence and additional verification. 3rd, be very careful with all documents you are asked to sign, even if it seems innocuous. I am writing down his recommendations. My mind works clearly despite my age, and despite the pain of betrayal. Thank you, Lyle. I appreciate your honesty. I'm getting up to leave. Erwin, Lyle rises as well. I'm sorry to have to tell you this. I know how important your family is to you. Was important, I correct myself. I don't seem to have a family now. Just a man with my last name who sees me as an ATM machine. Leaving the office, I decide to walk, even though I usually call a cab. I need to think, to clear my head. The Big Sioux River flows slowly to my left, reflecting the clouds and skyscrapers. I stop at the parapet and stare out at the water. How many times have Eleanor and I walked here, holding hands, dreaming of the future, about our son growing up, becoming successful, bringing grandchildren? We never got any grandchildren. Audrey once said that children didn't fit into their life plan. My phone vibrates. A message from Noel. Need to talk urgently. Tomorrow at 10, same place? I reply with a short yes and continue on my way home, feeling the heaviness in my chest mingle with growing determination. If Reese thinks he can manipulate me into thinking I'm a weak old man, he's sorely mistaken. I may be old, but I'm not naive or helpless. In the evening, I call my lawyer, Haley Booth, and make an appointment for the day after tomorrow. Then I go into my office and pull out a binder of documents about my finances. It's a good time to review my will and asset structure. If my son's looking for an easy score, he's not going to get it. Meeting Noel the next morning only confirmed my worst fears. We were sitting in our usual corner of the blue cup, and his eyes, usually beaming with good-natured irony, were serious and focused. I managed to find out something through an old connection, Noel said, lowering his voice even though no one else was around. Reese is up to his eyeballs in debt, Irwin. He owes bookies, creditors, and worst of all, people who don't go to court to get their money back. I squeezed the coffee cup so hard my knuckles turned white. How much? Over $1 million, probably a lot more. His brokerage firm is on the verge of closing. Clients are leaving after several failed investments. Noel paused, clearly reluctant to continue. And there are rumors of misuse of client funds. Misappropriation? My voice sounded muffled. Nothing official yet, but if the rumors are true, he could face not only ruin, but jail. I closed my eyes, feeling anger and grief struggling inside me. My son isn't just irresponsible, he's probably a criminal, and I, his father, hadn't noticed, or didn't want to notice. Well, I said finally, opening my eyes, I can see why he wanted my money so badly. He's desperate. And desperation makes people dangerous, Noel said. Be careful, my friend. I will. Yesterday, I already talked to the bank about additional account protection, and today I'm meeting with a lawyer. Noel nodded approvingly. Wise decision. But remember, this is your son we're talking about. He knows your habits, your routine, maybe even your passwords. You think he's capable of... I couldn't finish the sentence, unable to say what I was thinking out loud. I don't know what he's capable of when he's cornered, Noel said. But I do know that fear of ruin and imprisonment can turn a man into someone we don't recognize. The rest of the day passed like a blur. I met with Haley Booth, my attorney, and we drafted a new will. I excluded Reese and Audrey from it, putting all of my assets into the administration of a trust with clear instructions for charitable donations. Haley also offered to file a restraining order against Reese, but I declined for the time being. Regardless, I couldn't imagine my son being capable of physical violence. Returning home in the evening, I felt devastated. There was an oppressive silence in the house. I turned on the light in the living room and shuddered. For a moment, I thought I saw Eleanor sitting on the couch, just a play of light and shadow. I'm so tired, I'm already dreaming of my dead wife. Oh, Ellie, I mumbled, sinking into the chair. What would you do if you were me? I knew the answer. She'd give Reese another chance, and another, and another. Eleanor always believed in redemption, but I wasn't her. I was almost 80 years old and I didn't have the time or energy for endless disappointments. The morning began with a phone call. I had just showered and was about to eat breakfast when the landline rang. It was early 9 o'clock on the clock. Irwin Travers, I answered. Mr. Travers, this is Julian Hardwick from First National Bank. We were talking the other day about additional protection for your accounts. Yes, Mr. Hardwick, I remember. The banker's voice sounded strained, which alerted me. Did something happen? I'm afraid so. Your son, Reese Travers, came into our branch this morning. He presented a power of attorney on your behalf and attempted to withdraw all funds from your accounts. I felt the room start to spin around me. Power of attorney? I didn't sign anything. What power of attorney? I asked, trying my best to speak calmly. A document dated the day before yesterday, with your signature on it. Or what looks like your signature. Hardwick paused. As per our agreement yesterday, the staff requested additional confirmation and contacted me. I immediately realized something was wrong and called you. You did the right thing, I praised, though I was seething inside. The power of attorney was forged. I never signed anything like that. That's what I thought. The banker sounded relieved. We denied Mr. Travers access to the accounts, citing the need for further verification. He was unhappy. I can imagine, I replied dryly. Mr. Travers, Hardwick continued, given the seriousness of the situation, perhaps you should consider filing a police report. Forging a power of attorney is a criminal offense. I closed my eyes. File a report on my own son? Send him to jail? Yeah, think about it, I replied. In the meantime, I'd like to take a few more precautions. Perhaps I should come to the bank in person? Sure, I can see you in an hour if it's convenient for you. I'll be there at 10. After hanging up the phone, I sat at the kitchen table, trying to collect my thoughts. My son forged my signature, tried to steal all my money. My son, who I raised, provided an education, gave every opportunity. The Reese that Eleanor loved so much, believed in so much. Bitterness and anger overwhelmed me, but I forced myself to calm down. Now was not the time for emotion, it was time for action. I had a quick breakfast, got dressed, and hailed a cab. On the way to the bank, I dialed Haley Booth's number and briefly outlined the situation. She promised to prepare the necessary documents and meet me at the bank. The office of First National Bank was located in a historic building in the center of South Sioux City. Marble columns, high ceilings, a sense of reliability and stability. Hardwick met me in the lobby, a tall, trim man in his 50s, with a neat haircut and an impeccable suit. Mr. Travers, he shook my hand firmly, come into my office. We went up to the second floor, where the offices of the bank's management were located. Hardwick's office was decorated in dark wood and leather, a classic banker's style. Haley Booth was already there, a slender, middle-aged woman with short red hair and a keen eye. Irwin, she stepped up to meet me. I prepared the documents we talked about. Thank you, Haley. I shook her hand and sat down in the chair. So, Hardwick began, let's discuss what measures we can take to protect your assets. I want to close all joint accounts with my son, I said, and I want to revoke any powers of attorney that may have been issued in his or his wife's name. Hardwick nodded. That can be done immediately. You have 2 joint accounts with Mr. Reese Travers, a savings account and an investment account. We can close them and transfer the funds to your personal accounts. Do that. As for powers of attorney, Haley stepped in, I've prepared a statement revoking all previously granted powers of attorney. It will be effective immediately upon notarization. We can arrange that right here, Hardwick suggested. We have a notary on staff. I nodded, feeling strangely relieved, like I was cutting a Gordian knot. There's something else, I added after a pause. I want to change all the passwords and access codes to my accounts. And I want to make sure that no one but me can access them. Not in person, not online, not over the phone. That makes sense, Hardwick agreed. We'll set up multi-factor authentication for all your accounts, and we'll add a special note in the system that any transactions require your personal presence and additional verification. One last thing. I pulled an envelope from my inside jacket pocket. I want to exclude my son and his wife from my will. Haley has already prepared a new version, but I want the bank to be aware of my intentions as well. Hardwick accepted the envelope with mild surprise. This is an unusual request, but I understand your motives. We will add this information to your client file. The next hour was spent on paperwork. I signed papers, chose new passwords, answered questions for additional verification. Each signature, each decision distanced me from my son, severed ties that had existed for decades. I felt a strange combination of bitterness and release. That's it, Mr. Travers, Hardwick finally said. Your accounts are now secure. The joint accounts with your son are closed, all powers of attorney revoked. No one will be able to access your assets without your personal presence and multiple levels of verification. Thank you. I stood up, feeling tired but also determined. You have no idea how important this is to me. I understand, Hardwick said seriously, And I'm truly sorry that you had to face this situation. Haley walked out of the bank with me. It was overcast outside and rain was coming down. Are you sure you don't want to file a police report? She asked as we waited for my cab. I'm sure, I answered. I don't want to see my son behind bars. It's enough for me to know that he won't be able to get his hands on my money anymore. It's your decision, Irwin. She put her hand on my shoulder. But if you change your mind, or if you have any new problems, call me anytime. The cab arrived and I drove home, looking at the streets of South Sioux City floating by. The city I'd lived in most of my life suddenly seemed foreign to me. Or maybe it was me who seemed foreign to myself, an old man who had severed the last ties with his own son. At home, I made tea and sat in a chair by the window, looking out at the garden. It began to rain, the drops dripping down the window pane, blurring the outlines of the roses and maples. I thought of Eleanor, how she loved to listen to the sound of the rain, how we sat like this, side by side in silence, and we didn't need words. I'm sorry, Ellie, I thought. I failed to keep our family together. I couldn't raise my son to be the man you wanted him to be. The phone rang around 6 in the evening. I knew who it was before I even looked at the screen. Reese, probably already found out what happened at the bank. I hesitated, staring at the blinking screen. Part of me wanted to ignore the call, to shut out the pain and disappointment. But the other part, the part that would always be a father no matter what, made me pick up the phone. Yes, I said simply. Dad, Reese's voice trembled. There was a note of panic and desperation in it that I hadn't noticed before. What have you done? Why did you close our joint accounts? Why did you try to withdraw all the money from my personal accounts using a fake power of attorney? I answered question for question, surprised at the calmness in my voice. Pause, I could hear Reese breathing heavily. It's a misunderstanding, he finally said. I didn't forge any powers of attorney. I just wanted to protect your money. Move it to a safer place. Stop lying, Reese, I sighed. The bank showed me a document with my forged signature on it. You didn't just try to steal my money. You committed a felony. Dad, please, his voice trailed off. You don't understand. I'm in a desperate situation. I needed that money to pay off my debts. I'd pay you back, I swear. How did you pay me back for the apartment? Or the wedding? Or that failed startup? I could feel the bitterness rising inside me. You never give anything back, Reese. You just take and take. Yeah, I'll make it up to you, Dad. Give me another chance. Please. He sounded really desperate. If not for me, at least for Mom. You know she'd want you to forgive me. At the mention of Eleanor, something inside me snapped. He had no right to use her memory like that. Don't you dare drag your mother into this. My voice grew harsher. She loved you unconditionally, but even her love wasn't blind. She wrote in her diary about how worried she was that you would never learn to stand on your own 2 feet. You read her diary? Reese sounded shocked. Yeah. And you know what I found? She saw your mercantilism. She saw the way Audrey's eyes lit up when you talked about money. She just didn't want to believe it. Neither did I. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then I heard a soft sob. Daddy, I beg you. Reese's voice shook with tears. I'm sorry. I made a terrible mistake. I know I betrayed your trust, but I am your son, your flesh and blood. Will you just cut me out of your life? I closed my eyes, feeling something inside me finally break. Something I'd been trying to keep alive all these years. Belief in my son, hope that he would become a man I could be proud of after all. I've already cut you out, Reese, I said quietly. You're out of the will. All powers of attorney have been revoked. You won't get another dime from me. You can't do this. His voice changed from fear to anger. I'm entitled to my inheritance. It's family money. It's my money, I said firmly. I've earned it over 40 years, and I decide who I leave it to. I've rewritten my will. Everything will go to a charity. You're out of your mind, Reese screamed. Noel set you up, didn't he? That old schemer never loved me. Noel had nothing to do with it. You made your own choices, son. I said the last word with bitter irony. When you chose to forge my signature and steal my money. I will sue you, Reese threatened. I'll prove that you're incompetent, that you don't know what you're doing. You can try, I grinned. But considering you just tried to commit fraud, I wouldn't recommend that you attract the attention of the court system. There was a long pause. I could hear Reese's heavy breathing. Dad, he finally said, and his voice shook again. Please, I'm desperate. If I don't get the money by the end of the week, I'm in serious trouble. Dangerous people. They're threatening me. And Audrey. You're a grown man, Reese. Deal with your own problems. I paused. Like I've always dealt with mine. Are you, you're leaving me? There was disbelief in his voice. Your only son? No, Reese. You're the one who abandoned me, I said. The moment you decided my money was more important than our relationship. The moment you forged my signature. Goodbye. I hung up without waiting for an answer. I sat in silence, listening to the sound of rain outside the window. There was an emptiness inside. No anger, no grief, just a strange relief at the decision I'd made. I had done what I had to do, protected myself, forced my son to face the consequences of his actions. Will he learn a lesson from this? Would he get better? I didn't know. And to my surprise, I found that I didn't care anymore. My responsibility for him was over. I stood up and walked to the window. The rain had intensified, turning the garden into a blur of greens and colors. But behind the rain, the sun is bound to come. It always comes. I woke to the doorbell ringing, insistent, demanding. The clock read 9 in the morning. I hadn't slept well since my conversation with Reese last night, waking up every hour and falling back into a restless slumber. The dreams were fragmented, Eleanor shaking her head reproachfully. Reese the child reaching out to me, numbers and documents swirling in a whirlwind. The call came again, long, insistent. I pulled on my robe and walked slowly down the stairs, taking my time. I knew who it was. Through the frosted glass of the door, I could see two silhouettes, Reese's tall figure and Audrey's slender silhouette beside him. I froze for a moment, gathering my wits, then opened the door. Father? Reese stood on the threshold, pale with reddened eyes. His usually immaculate appearance was gone. Crumpled shirt, stubble on his cheeks, disheveled hair. Next to him, Audrey looked collected but tense as a string. Her eyes threw lightning bolts. Reese. Audrey, I nodded, not inviting them in. To what do I owe this early visit? You know why we're here, Reese stepped forward. We need to talk. You can't just cut us out of your life. I can, and I already have. I stood in the doorway, unmoving. It was all said on the phone yesterday. Erwin? Audrey stepped in, her voice honeyed, but her eyes remained cold. We understand you're upset, but let's discuss this like adults. Inside, not on the doorstep. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to slam the door in their faces, but the other part, the part that still remembered the little boy I'd taught to ride a bike, made me back off and let them through. 15 minutes, I said. No more than that. They made their way into the living room. Reese sank heavily onto the couch, and Audrey remained standing, tapping her foot nervously. Father, Reese began, his voice sounding hoarse. I know I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. I should never have tried to access your accounts without authorization. Not a mistake, I corrected him, remaining standing. A crime. Forgery of documents and attempted fraud. Okay, felony. Reese held up his hands as if giving up. I admit it. I was desperate. I have massive debts, creditors threatening me. And you thought the best way out was to steal from your own father? I shook my head. Not to ask for help, not to explain the situation, but just to steal the money? I'd give it back, Reese exclaimed. I swear I would have returned every dime as soon as I got back on my feet. How did you pay back all your previous loans? I grinned. Reese lowered his head, unable to find an answer. Erwin, Audrey intervened, stepping closer. We understand your frustration, but to cut us out of the will, to sever all ties is too drastic. We're still family. Family, I raised an eyebrow. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't forge signatures. Family doesn't cheat. People make mistakes, Audrey insisted. Even in families, especially families. Isn't that what forgiveness is all about? Forgiveness has to be earned, I replied. Not take it for granted. Reese looked up, his eyes a mixture of despair and anger. What do you want me to do? He asked. Humiliate myself in front of you? Crawl on my knees? You've always been like that. Cold, calculating. Even with Mom. I felt something inside me clench at his words. Cold? With Eleanor? Didn't he see how much I loved her? How I'd cared for her all these years? Leave your mother out of this, I said quietly but firmly. It would break her heart to see what you've become. No, Reese stood up, his face contorted. It would break her heart to see you disown your own son, her only child. She always said you were too hard on me, expected too much, that you never accepted me for who I am. The way you are? I could feel the anger rising in me. What are you, Reese? A liar? A thief? A man who tries to steal from his own father and then blames him for his lack of love? I'm a man who made a mistake, Reese shouted. A man who got tangled up in debt and saw no other way out. I'm your son, damn it. Your flesh and blood. And I am your father, I replied. The man who gave you life, upbringing, education, who was always there for you when you needed help. And how have you repaid that? Reese turned away, unable to find an answer. Audrey walked over to him, put a hand on his shoulder, then turned to me. Erwin, let's all calm down. We can find a compromise. Reese is willing to compensate for the moral damage. Maybe some kind of formal agreement. Compromise? I shook my head. What kind of compromise can there be after what you did? You tried to steal my money. You lied to my face. You thought I was a feeble-minded old man who could be manipulated? That's not true, Audrey said quickly. We never thought you were feeble-minded. We were just concerned for your well-being. Stop it, I held up my hand. Enough lies. I saw the documents you brought last time. I saw the power of attorney Reese tried to use at the bank. It was all planned. You just didn't expect me to take precautions. Audrey pursed her lips, her eyes narrowing. You can't just throw us out of your life, she said, and her tone changed to one of defiance. We can contest your will, prove that you were under the influence of a third party, that you were not in your right mind. I laughed, short and bitter. Go ahead, try it. I'm sure the court will be very interested in the story of how my son tried to rob me using a forged power of attorney, and then decided to declare me incompetent when his plan failed. Audrey's face went pale. She clearly hadn't expected me to be ready for an open confrontation. Reese sank back down onto the couch, covering his face with his hands. Look, I said, suddenly feeling tired. I'm not going to file a police report. I'm not going to publicize this case. I don't want my son behind bars, but I'm also not going to pretend it didn't happen. Your actions have consequences, and one of them is that you will never get my money again. Not now, not after I'm dead. Dad, please. Reese lifted his head, and I saw tears in his eyes. I know I betrayed your trust, but I can change. I can be a better person. Just give me a chance. For a moment, I felt doubt. Could he really be remorseful? Maybe this really was a moment of desperation, not cold calculation. But then I remembered all the instances in the past, how Reese had sworn he'd change after each loan, how he promised to pay the money back, how he'd assured me this was the last time, and how it all happened over and over again. No, I said firmly. I gave you chances. Lots of chances. Too many. You took them all. You're a grown man now, Reese. You're 45 years old. It's time you learned to live on your own, not at your father's expense. You're a monster, Audrey said suddenly. A cold, calculating old man with no heart. Your son is in trouble, and you're throwing him away like an unnecessary thing. I'm not throwing him away, I replied calmly. I just stopped funding him. There's a difference. There's a difference, Audrey exclaimed. You know we're in trouble, that we're facing bankruptcy, losing our house, and you have millions just sitting in your accounts. Money you won't even be able to spend for the rest of your life. My money, I reminded you, earned by me, and I decide how I spend it and who I leave it to. It's family money, Audrey screamed. Reese is your only heir. You have no moral right to give it to some outsider. I have every right, morally and legally, I said, and I've decided that my fortune will go to charity, to help those who really need it, those who deserve it. And I don't? Reese asked quietly. After what you've done? No. Reese stood up. His face changed, a look of determination mixed with bitterness. You know, Father, I've always felt I wasn't good enough for you. No matter what I did, it was never enough. I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't hardworking enough. I wasn't successful enough. You always wanted me to be a copy of you, and I'm not you. No, I agreed. You're not me. I never cheated my parents. I never tried to steal from them. I built my life with my own hands, not waiting for an inheritance. You've always been so smug, Reese shook his head. I'm all by myself. I've accomplished everything. Have you ever thought that maybe your obsession with work, your constant absence from home, your inflated expectations are the reason I grew up the way I did? That maybe you bear some of the responsibility too? His words hit me harder than I expected, because somewhere deep inside, I knew there was some truth to them. I worked really hard when he was a kid, really had high expectations for him. Maybe I really had been too strict, too demanding. Maybe you're right, I said after a pause. Maybe I wasn't the perfect father. But that doesn't excuse what you did. Adults don't hold their parents responsible for their actions. They accept the consequences of their decisions. Even if those consequences destroy the family? Audrey asked. It wasn't the consequences that destroyed the family, but the actions themselves, I answered. Reese made his choice when he decided to forge my signature. When he decided that my money was more important than our relationship. It was desperation, Reese exclaimed. You don't understand the position I'm in. I'm being threatened by the people I owe. They say that if I don't pay them by the end of the week, then what? I asked. What will they do? Reese lowered his eyes. They're not the nicest people. They have ways of getting debts. So go to the police, I suggested. I can't, Reese shook his head. It's complicated. There's client money involved. If it gets out, I could face not only bankruptcy, but jail. Embezzlement of client funds. I nodded. I already knew that. Reese looked up at me in surprise. How? I have my sources, I replied. I know about your debts, the problems in your office, the way you've used client money to cover your personal expenses. I know everything, Reese, and that's why I won't believe any more of your promises. Not one oath about this is the last time, or that you'll pay back every dime. I've heard that one too many times. Reese turned even paler. Audrey walked over to him and put a hand on his shoulder, a gesture of support that looked strangely mechanical, as if she were performing a learned role. What do you suggest we do? Reese asked quietly. I can't get out of this hole without your help. You're a grown man, Reese, I repeated. Find a way. Sell the house. Sell the cars. The jewelry. All those expensive things you and Audrey love so much. Declare bankruptcy if you have to. Start from scratch. Start from scratch? Audrey exclaimed. At our age. Do you know what you're talking about? It's impossible. It's quite possible, I argued. People do it all the time. Lose everything and start over. It's called life. That's easy for you to say, Audrey snapped. With your millions? You've never known real need, I laughed, and this time I laughed heartily. You don't know anything about my life, Audrey. I grew up in a family with 5 children. My father worked in a factory. My mother was a housewife. We lived from paycheck to paycheck. I started working at 14, delivering newspapers. I paid for my own education by working nights and weekends, so don't tell me about real need. Audrey averted her eyes, unable to find an answer. Reese stared at the floor, his shoulders slumped. Your time is up, I said, glancing at the clock. 15 minutes have passed. I want you to leave, both of you. Dad, please, Reese looked up at me, eyes full of desperation. Don't do this. Don't disown me. I'm not disowning you as a son, I replied. I'm disowning you as an heir. There is a difference. If you ever really want to restore our relationship, without money, without self-interest, just as father and son, my door's open. But I won't be your ATM anymore. You're a cruel man, Audrey said, gathering her purse, and you will regret it. When you're alone, without a family, there won't even be anyone to hand you a glass of water. I'm already alone, I answered. Ever since Eleanor died, everything else was an illusion. Reese stood up, straightening, trying to retain some vestige of dignity. All right, Father, you've made your choice. I accept it. His voice sounded strangled. But as you lie on your deathbed, remember this day. Remember how you threw your only son out of your life for money. Not for money, I shook my head. For principle, for the truth, for what I've tried to teach you all your life, that actions have consequences, that you can't lie and cheat with impunity, even if it seems like the easiest way out. Goodbye, Irwin, Audrey said coldly, heading for the exit. I hope your principles will keep you warm in your old age. Reese followed her, but he stopped at the door and turned around. You know, Father, my mother always said that underneath your sternness there was a good heart, that you just didn't know how to show your feelings. Now I realize she was wrong. Underneath the sternness is just coldness. He walked out, closing the door behind him, not with a slam, but quietly, almost inaudibly. It was worse than if he had slammed it loudly. I stood in the empty living room, staring at the closed door. Reese's words echoed in my head. Cold underneath the harshness? Perhaps he was right. Maybe I really had kept my emotions under control for too long, too used to hiding my feelings behind a mask of rationality. But that didn't change the point. Didn't change what he did. Didn't change my decision. I walked over to the window, watching Reese and Audrey get into their expensive car. They were arguing fiercely about something. I could see their gesticulations, though I couldn't hear the words. Then the car moved off, taking my son, perhaps forever, out of my life. I felt a tear roll down my cheek, the first one in a long time. I hadn't cried even at Eleanor's funeral. Held on, strong as ever. But now, alone in an empty house, I allowed myself that weakness. I'm sorry, Ellie, I whispered, watching the car drive away. I couldn't keep our family together. I couldn't be the father you wanted for our son. The car sped around the corner, and I turned away from the window. The house suddenly seemed huge and empty. Every room, every corner reminded me of those who were no longer here and might never be. Of Eleanor with her warm smile, of little Reese running through the corridors. But I couldn't do otherwise. Couldn't let Reese keep manipulating me, using me. Couldn't pretend everything was okay when everything had gone so wrong. I made my way into the study and sat down at the desk. Opening the bottom drawer, I pulled out an old photo album, flipped through the pages. Reese as a child, Reese as a teenager, Reese with Eleanor, Reese in her graduation gown, Reese at her wedding, a whole life captured on photographic paper. Where did I go wrong? When did I lose touch with my son? When did he start seeing me only as a source of money instead of a father? I didn't know the answers. All I knew was that there was no turning back, that some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt, that sometimes you have to make painful decisions to preserve your dignity, your principles, your identity. It was a bitter freedom, but freedom nonetheless. It had been a week since our breakup with Reese, a quiet, empty week, filled with the echo of unspoken words and the invisible presence of absent people. I did routine things, reading, working in the garden, occasionally going out shopping. Life went on, albeit with a strange sense of the unreality of what was happening. On Wednesday, as usual, I met Noel at the Blue Cup. He was already waiting for me at our table, scrutinizing the chessboard. We sometimes played in the mornings, when there were few customers in the cafe. Irwin, Noel looked up, and I noticed an unusual expression on his face, a mixture of concern and irritation. Sit down. We need to talk. I sat down, feeling strangely tense. Hugh brought my usual black coffee, but instead of his usual smile, he gave me a strange look, as if assessing me. What's going on? I asked when Hugh stepped back. Noel leaned closer. You wouldn't believe what your son is doing. He's spreading rumors all over town about your condition. What do you mean? I sipped my coffee, trying to stay calm. He's telling anyone who's willing to listen that you're suffering from senile dementia, that you've become paranoid, accusing him of non-existent conspiracies, forgetting basic things. Noel shook his head. He's even insinuating that your new financial decisions are the result of dementia. I set my cup down, feeling a cold anger rising inside. And a lot of people believe this nonsense? Unfortunately, yes, Noel sighed. People love gossip, especially dramatic gossip. A story about a rich old man losing his mind and disowning his only son is just too juicy to resist. That's why Hugh was looking at me so strangely, I muttered. And he wasn't the only one. Yesterday I heard Mrs. Donahue, remember, the dentist's widow, discussing with her friends in the supermarket that poor Mr. Travers has given up and is now stalking her own son. I shook my head, grinning bitterly. No wonder. Reese always had a way of presenting himself as a victim of circumstances, even when he created those circumstances himself. This is more serious than just gossip, Irvine. Noel looked genuinely concerned. He seemed to be preparing the ground for contesting your will, or even trying to get custody of you. I felt the blood drain from my face. Guardianship? Are you kidding? I'm afraid not. Linda Fowler, you remember my neighbor, works for social services, said Reese and Audrey had been making inquiries about the guardianship process for cognitively impaired seniors. I sat in silence, digesting this information. My own son is trying to have me declared incompetent. After everything that has happened, he didn't stop, but went further, choosing a more sophisticated way to get his hands on my money. What are you going to do? Noel asked. First, I'm going to see Haley again, I said. I need a legal defense. But also, I paused, thinking about the next step. I need to disprove these rumors, show people that I'm of sound mind and good judgment. And how do you plan to do that? I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. After my meeting with Noel, I called Haley Booth and set up a meeting for the next day. When I got home, I sat in a chair by the window and thought. I looked out at the garden, at the maple trees whose leaves were beginning to turn purple in the fall, and thought about how quickly a life built over decades could crumble. I thought that by closing the accounts and removing Reese from the will, I had put an end to the story, but it turned out to be a comma. The son wasn't going to give up so easily. The next morning, I met with Haley in her office, a small but elegant space in the downtown business district. When I told her about the rumors and Reese's potential plans, her usually calm face turned serious. This is a serious threat, Irwin, she said. If he can convince the court that you're incapacitated, he could gain control of all your assets and decisions, including medical ones. But that's absurd, and I objected. Anyone who spends 5 minutes with me will see that I am completely sane. Unfortunately, the courts aren't always so straightforward, Haley replied, especially when it comes to the elderly and big money. All it takes is a few instances of strange behavior, a couple of accounts of forgetfulness or paranoid ideas, and the case can take a nasty turn. What do you suggest? We need to be proactive. She opened her laptop and started typing. First, you should undergo a full medical examination, including neuropsychological testing. Get an official report on your cognitive status. Good, I nodded. What else? Second, we need to prepare documents that will protect you in case Reese does file a petition for guardianship. That includes a medical power of attorney and a power of attorney in the event of incapacity, but naming people you really trust, not Reese. Noel, I said. I trust Noel. Good choice, Haley approved. And third, we need to gather evidence of Reese's attempt to commit fraud on your accounts. That would show that his actions weren't motivated by concern for you, but by a desire to gain control of your finances. I nodded, feeling the tension of the last few days release a little. Having a plan, concrete steps, always helped me deal with my anxiety. Thank you, Haley, I said. I appreciate your help. It's my job, she smiled weakly. And Irwin, I admire your determination. Not everyone can stand up to their own children, even when they're clearly wrong. Her words warmed me. After all the doubts and pain of the last few weeks, it was nice to hear that someone thought my actions were right. I spent the next 2 weeks methodically executing my defense plan. Had a checkup with a neurologist, Dr. Paul Chang, who after a series of tests concluded that my cognitive function was above average for my age group, with no evidence of dementia or other neurocognitive disorders. Formed new powers of attorney, appointing Noel and Haley as decision-makers in the event of my incapacity. Gathered all the evidence of Reese's attempt to access my accounts, including testimony from bank employees and a copy of the forged power of attorney. But a legal defense wasn't enough. I needed to counteract the rumors Reese continued to spread. So I decided to act openly and directly. I started small, resuming my participation in the local library's book club, which I'd abandoned after Eleanor's death. At the first meeting, I presented a brilliant analysis of T.S. Eliot's Barren Land, causing several participants to literally open their mouths in amazement. Then he signed up to volunteer at the South Sioux City Community Center, where he helped seniors with financial planning, for free, of course. And when the local newspaper announced an essay contest about the city's history, I wrote a detailed and elegant essay about the development of South Sioux City's financial sector, which won first place. Gradually, the perception of me in the city began to change. People who used to cast sympathetic or suspicious glances at me now greeted me with respect. Hugh from the Blue Cup was smiling again, bringing my coffee. Even Mrs. Donahue, upon meeting me in the supermarket, embarrassingly apologized for perhaps misreading the situation. But despite these small victories, loneliness remained my constant companion. Evenings in the empty house were especially hard. I often sat in Eleanor's chair, looking at the pictures on the mantelpiece, and talked to her as if she could hear me. "You know, Ellie," I said one evening, sipping my whiskey, "sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing. Maybe I should have just given Reese the money. Maybe none of this was worth it." The picture was silent, but I could almost hear what Eleanor would have said. She had always believed in principles, in honesty, in taking responsibility for one's actions. She wouldn't have approved of our son's actions. "You're right," I sighed, responding to the imaginary answer. "It's not about money, it's about truth. It's about respect, about the fact that some things can't be bought or sold." In early November, about a month after my breakup with Reese, Noel suggested a small get-together at my house. Nothing fancy, just dinner with a few old friends. I agreed, though without enthusiasm. Social interactions had been hard for me lately, but the evening turned out to be exactly what I needed. Noel showed up with a bottle of excellent scotch. Haley brought homemade apple pie. Dr. Chang, with whom we had unexpectedly found common ground during the examination, joined with his wife, a lovely woman named Grace, a literature teacher. Even Hugh from the Blue Cup stopped by, bringing his famous sandwiches. We sat in the living room, the fireplace crackling, a leisurely conversation flowing. No one mentioned Reese or the scandal directly, but I could feel the support of everyone there. "You know, Irwin," Dr. Chang said at one point, "I admire your resilience. Many people your age prefer the path of least resistance, especially when it comes to family." "I'm too old to take the easy way out," I replied. "At this stage of life, you want to be sure you're doing the right thing, not the convenient thing." "That's a rare quality," Grace said. "At any age." "Irwin's always been like that," Noel cut in. "I remember back in the 80s when everyone was chasing fast money and shady deals. He refused to take part in one very lucrative but ethically questionable project. Lost a lot of money, but kept his reputation. And he never regretted it," I added. The evening continued, the conversation flowing freely from one topic to another. We discussed politics and art, shared memories and anecdotes. At one point, I caught myself thinking that, for the first time in a long time, I felt normal. Not happy. The wound from Reese's betrayal was still too fresh for happiness, but calm, at peace with myself and my decisions. After the guests left, I sat by the fireplace, finishing the rest of my scotch and reflecting on the evening. About the people who had come to support me, about the warm words and genuine smiles, about how maybe family isn't just about those who are related to you by blood, but those who share your values and principles. My phone vibrated. A message from Haley. "Thanks for tonight, Irwin. Remember that you are not alone in this struggle. We're all on your side." I smiled, feeling warmth spreading across my chest. Yes, I had lost a son. Yes, I may never see him again. But I am not alone. I have friends, support, and the respect of people whose opinions really matter to me. The next morning, I woke up with an unusual sense of energy and determination. After eating a quick breakfast, I went to the garage where I kept old boxes of things I hadn't sorted through in years. Among them was a cello, an instrument I had played in my youth but had abandoned when my career and family began to take up all my time. I pulled out the case, opened it. The cello was covered in dust and the strings were loose, but otherwise the instrument looked fine. I carefully wiped the deck with a soft cloth, tuned the strings as best I could by ear, and swung the bow. The sound was awful, squeaky, fake. I laughed. "Well, Irving," I said to myself, It looks like you have a lot to learn all over again. That same day, I found the name of a good string repairman in South Sioux City on the internet and took the cello to him. I also signed up for lessons with a teacher at the local music school, a nice middle-aged woman named Vivian Price, who upon hearing my story, agreed to give private lessons to an adult beginner with little experience. You know, Mr. Travers, she said as we discussed schedules, a lot of people your age are afraid to start something new. They think it's too late to learn, but it's not. It's never too late to go back to something you love or to discover something completely new. Her words stayed with me, echoing in my head as I drove home. It's never too late to go back to what you love. I thought of Eleanor, of our dreams of old age that never came true, about Reese, about the love I had for him when he was little, of dashed hopes and new possibilities. Perhaps that's what life is all about, constantly saying goodbye to some dreams and welcoming others, constantly renewing and adapting, a constant search for balance between what we have lost and what we can still find. That evening, I received a letter from Reese's attorney, a formal notice of his intention to contest my will on the grounds of cognitive impairments affecting my ability to make rational decisions. I read the document without much emotion, then carefully placed it in a folder with other legal papers and called Haley. He's really doing it, I said when she answered, trying to have me declared incompetent. We're ready for that, Irwin, Haley replied confidently. We have all the proof we need. Don't worry. I'm not worried, I replied, surprised at my own calmness. I just want this to be over, so I can move on. It will be, she promised. Trust me. After talking to Haley, I went out into the garden. It was a quiet evening in early November, and the air was cool and clear. Most of the maple leaves had already fallen, forming a golden carpet on the ground. Eleanor's roses were gone for the winter, but some bushes were still showing stubborn buds, refusing to surrender to the cold. I stood breathing in the fall air and felt a strange calmness. Yes, there was a struggle ahead. Yes, my own son had become my adversary. But I was prepared for it. I had the support of friends, a legal defense, a clear mind, and a strong resolve. And most importantly, a clear conscience. I knew I had done the right thing in protecting myself from manipulation and fraud, even if the source of those actions was my own son. The sun was setting, coloring the sky in shades of pink and purple. I stared at the horizon and thought about the future, about cello lessons, about volunteering at the community center, about new friends and new interests, about a life that went on, no matter what. Ellie would be proud, I thought, not because of the breakup with Reese. That would have broken her heart, of course, but because of my determination to move on, to not give up, to not let grief and betrayal define my life. I turned and walked slowly toward the house, feeling the cold air tingle my cheeks. Tomorrow would be a new day, and I will greet it with an open heart and a clear mind, ready for whatever it brings. 6 months is both long and short at the same time. Long enough for the seasons to change, for the harsh winter of South Sioux City to give way to a gentle spring. Short enough that the memories of last October are still fresh in my mind. I sit in the living room in front of the open window, filling the house with the sounds of the cello. It's the D minor scale, not the most difficult, but I'm still going back to basic exercises to strengthen my fingers and regain technique. The cello stands between my knees like an old friend who has patiently waited all these years for us to meet. Vivian Price, my teacher, says I'm making amazing progress for someone who hasn't touched an instrument in almost 40 years. You have musical memory in your fingers, Mr. Travers, she said at our last lesson. Your hands remember what the mind has forgotten. I think of this as I play a simple melody, Saint-Saëns, the Swan, about musical memory, about how some things stay with us forever, even if we don't touch them for decades. Like the love for Eleanor, which didn't disappear with her death, it just changed shape. Like the love for my son, despite his betrayal, despite our separation, despite the bitterness and disappointment, it's still somewhere inside, like a forgotten melody that my fingers suddenly recall the first time I touched the strings. The last 6 months have been a time of recovery and discovery. After that court case in December, a short but nasty trial in which Reese tried to contest my will and establish guardianship over me, life slowly returned to normal. Normal, but different. The court completely sided with me. Haley presented the case brilliantly, Dr. Chang's medical report, testimony from bank employees about Reese's attempted fraud, my articles in the local newspaper, and volunteer work. It all painted a picture of a man in perfect health and a clear mind. Reese and Audrey looked like exactly what they were, greedy relatives trying to take property from an elderly person. Judge Lomax, a stern woman with a discerning eye, not only dismissed Reese's lawsuit, but also issued a private ruling condemning his attempted abuse of the judicial process. The court cannot be a tool in family conflicts over money, she said in her closing argument. After the trial, Reese tried to talk to me, but I walked on by without slowing my step. What else was there to say? We'd both made our choices. I haven't seen him since. Noel occasionally brings news. Reese and Audrey have sold the house and moved to another city, Minneapolis, I think. Reese's brokerage firm went bankrupt, as predicted. There was some history with the Securities Commission, but it didn't go to court. Apparently, Reese managed to somehow settle the matter with client funds. However, his broker's license was suspended. Audrey, as far as I know, has taken a job at a law firm in Minneapolis. Not as prestigious as her previous job, but still. I finished the melody and set the cello aside. My fingers are getting tired faster than they used to. Age takes its toll, but I play every day, gradually increasing my practice time. It has become a kind of meditation, a way of communicating with the past and the present at the same time. My phone rings. It's Mabel Donovan from the community center. I started volunteering there back in November, at first just to show that I was quite capable and active. But then I got involved. It turned out that my experience as a financial analyst was in high demand among the city's older residents, many of whom are faced with complex financial decisions, from planning for retirement to protecting themselves from scammers. Erwin? Mabel's voice sounds cheerful as always. Could you do some additional consulting today? We have a new visitor, Mrs. Chen. She's just lost her husband and is completely confused about financial matters. Of course, Mabel, I replied. I'll be there at 2 o'clock. You're a lifesaver, she says with relief. I don't know what we would have done without you. As I hang up the phone, I smile. It's funny how life works out. 6 months ago, I was a lonely old man, almost cut off from the world, living out my days quietly in an empty house. Now my calendar is full. Cello lessons on Mondays and Thursdays, volunteering at the center on Tuesdays and Fridays, chess with Noel on Wednesdays, occasional poetry nights at the library on Saturdays. Sunday I usually rest, work in the garden or read. I go to the kitchen to prepare a light lunch before going downtown. As I pass the front door, I notice an envelope slipped under it. The mailman must have come by while I was playing and didn't hear the bell. I pick up the envelope. Plain, white, unmarked. Someone delivered it personally. On the front is my name in familiar handwriting, Reese's handwriting. I stand in the hallway, holding the envelope and feeling my heart start to beat faster. 6 months of no contact, and here's a letter. Part of me wants to immediately throw it away without reading it. The other part, the part that still remembers the little boy playing in the garden under the maple tree, wants to tear the envelope open right now. I take a deep breath and place the letter on the hall table. Lunch first, then the center. The letter can wait. The day passes in the usual cares. I counsel Mrs. Chen, a small woman with eyes full of grief and confusion. Her husband died suddenly, leaving her with many financial questions for which she doesn't know the answers. We take her situation step by step. Insurance, pension, taxes, bank accounts. By the end of the counseling session, she seems calmer, even smiling, thanking me. You have no idea how helpful this has been, Mr. Travers, she says, shaking my hand with both of her small palms. It's the first time in a month I've felt like I could handle it. I nod, understanding her feelings better than she can imagine. Losing a spouse is like falling into an abyss. At first it feels like you'll never reach the bottom, never be able to stop the fall. But at some point it slows down and you realize that you will survive, that life goes on, albeit in a different way. After the center, I meet Noel at the Blue Cup. We don't play chess. We just drink coffee and talk about politics, the latest book we've read, the upcoming South Sioux City Music Festival. By the way, Noel says in between, I hear Reese is back in town. Not for long. Something to do with selling their old house. I nod, not really surprised. He left a letter under my door today. Noel raises an eyebrow. And? I haven't read it yet. Noel gives me a hard look. Are you going to? I don't know, I answer honestly. Part of me wants to know what he wrote. The other part of me thinks it's best to leave it at that. Noel rubs his beard thoughtfully. Whatever you decide, you know I'll support you. I know, I smile at my old friend, and I appreciate it more than I can express. Back home in the evening, I see the envelope on the table again. It lies there like a time bomb, ready to blow up my hard-won peace. I pick it up and go into my office. I sit down in a chair by the window, where I can see the garden. It's full of spring flowers now. Eleanor's roses haven't bloomed yet, but the buds are swelling, promising blooms soon. Slowly I open the envelope, pulling out a folded piece of paper. Father, the letter begins. I know you probably don't want to see or hear from me after everything that's happened. I wouldn't want to if I were you either, but I have to try. I'm back in South Sioux City for a few days to take care of the last formalities of selling the house. I'd like to meet you, if you're willing. Not to ask for money or to challenge your judgment, just to talk. I've learned a lot these past few months. I've been rethinking a lot of things. If you're ready to hear me out, give me a call. My number's the same. Reese. I reread the letter several times. It seems sincere, without the usual manipulation. Maybe Reese has really realized something. Maybe losing everything, status, money, home, has made him reevaluate his life and values. Or maybe it's just a new way to get at my money. A new tactic after direct attempts and a lawsuit didn't work. I fold the letter and tuck it away in my desk drawer. I don't throw it away, but I don't pick up the phone either. Not today, maybe tomorrow, or the day after that, or never. Instead, I'm picking up the cello. Tonight I want to play something new. Vivian gave me the sheet music for Foray's piece, After the Dream. It's a little above my current level, but she said that sometimes it's good to take a swing at something challenging. I start playing, slowly, stumbling at difficult passages but not giving up. The music fills the house, pushing out the silence, pushing out the memories, pushing out the doubts. A week passes. Reese's letter still sits in my desk drawer, untouched since that first reading. I think about him every day, but I never dare call him. Not out of pride or anger, just caution. I've spent too much energy rebuilding my life to risk another disappointment. Friday night, after volunteering at the center, I stop by the Blue Cup for a cup of coffee. Hugh, as usual, greets me with a friendly smile. Erwin, black without sugar as usual? You know me too well, Hugh. I smile back. I sit down at my and Noel's table by the window, even though I'm alone tonight. Hugh brings coffee and lingers for a moment. Saw your son today, he says casually. He was asking about you. I look up. What about me? He asked if you still come here. Regularly, how you look. Hugh shrugs. I said you were fine. Better than fine, to be honest. Said you play the cello, help people at the center. I nod, not knowing what to say back. He looked different, Hugh continues. Not as cocky as he used to be. More, I don't know, more genuine. Thank you, Hugh, I say. I appreciate you telling me. Hugh shrugs again and goes off to serve other customers. I sit, sipping my coffee and looking out the window at the street. People pass by, going about their business, talking, laughing, living their lives. I think about Reese, about what Hugh said. More authentic. What does that mean? Has my son really changed? Or is it just a new mask? When I get home, I pull out the letter again. I reread it, trying to catch the real intentions between the lines. Then I pull out my phone, look at Reese's number in my contacts. My finger hovers over the call button. But I don't call. Instead, I walk to the garden shears in hand. Eleanor's roses need care if I want them to bloom well this summer. Working among the bushes, I feel a strange peacefulness. Life goes on, with or without Reese. I've created a new reality for myself, with music, with volunteer work, with new friends and old hobbies. I'm no longer that lonely old man trapped in an empty house with ghosts of the past. I'm living in the present. Another week passes. I learn from Noel that Reese has left town, having finalized his dealings with the house. Without waiting for my call, I feel a prick, not exactly regret, more like brooding. Did I make the right choice by not meeting him? Or did I miss a chance for reconciliation? But then I remember everything I've been through. The lies, the manipulation, the attempted theft, the legal battle. Trust once broken is hard to rebuild, and sometimes the price of trust is too high. May turns to June. Eleanor's roses bloom, filling the garden with fragrance and color. I continue my cello lessons, making progress. Vivian says I could play at the music school summer concert. Nothing complicated, just a short piece. I agree, although the thought of performing in front of an audience is a little daunting. In mid-June, I receive another letter from Reese, this time in the mail from Minneapolis. I open it with less excitement than the first. Father, he writes, I understand your decision not to see me. I have earned it. I just want you to know. I really have changed, or at least I'm trying to. Audrey and I broke up. I got a job. Not in finance, just a regular office worker. It's modest but honest. I also started attending a support group for people with gambling addictions. Yes, I had a problem that I hid from everyone, even Audrey. That's not an excuse for what I did, but maybe an explanation. I'm not asking you to forgive me or bring me back into your life. I just wanted you to know that your act, as painful as it was, made me finally face the truth. Maybe that was exactly what I needed. Reese. I fold the letter and tuck it away by the first one, in my desk drawer. I don't answer it, but I don't throw it away either. I need time to think about it, to decide if I'm ready to open that door again, or if it's better to leave it closed. On the last day of June, I perform at the music school concert. I play a simple piece by Bach, the aria. My hands are shaking a little with excitement, but I manage. People applaud, politely with respect for an elderly man who had the courage to go on stage and show his imperfect but sincere art. After the concert, Vivian comes up to me, hugs me. You were great, Erwin. I lost in the third measure, I say, smiling. No one noticed, and it doesn't matter. What matters is that you did it, that you weren't afraid to try. Her words stay with me as I walk home on this warm summer evening. Not afraid to try. Isn't that what it's all about? Not perfection, not error-free, but the courage to try. The willingness to take risks, even though you know you might make a mistake or fail. I sit in a chair on the veranda, looking out over the garden, drenched in the evening sun. Eleanor's roses are blooming red, pink, white. The maple tree we planted 30 years ago spreads its branches, providing welcome shade. Life goes on despite the losses and disappointments. I think of Reese, of his letters, about the fact that he seems to be really trying to change, about how maybe my decision to cut ties, however painful, has actually helped him get on the path of correction. I don't know if I'll ever answer his letters. I don't know if I will allow him back into my life. That decision has yet to be made, and I won't rush into it. But one thing I do know is that I don't regret my choice, for protecting myself, my dignity, my principles, for not allowing fear of loneliness or guilt to make me adopt unacceptable behavior, about finding the strength to start a new chapter of life when the previous one ended so bitterly. Sometimes principles have a price. Sometimes it's the price of relationships, connections, comfort. But without principles, we lose ourselves, our essence, our self-respect. And that's a loss that no amount of external consolation can make up for. The sun is setting, coloring the sky in shades of gold and purple. I sit on the veranda of my house, alone, but not lonely, with a sense of peace that comes not from a perfect life, but from a life lived according to my own values, from a life in which I made the hard but right choices. Tomorrow will be a new day, with a cello lesson, with volunteering at the center, with chess with Noel, with new opportunities and choices, and I will meet it with an open heart, a clear mind, and a calm soul, ready for whatever he brings, ready to continue living my life, imperfect, sometimes difficult, but my own.